Hello, and you're very welcome to the Town End podcast after a 1-0 victory for Dundalk on the road to, with Newtown in the Europa Conference League qualifier. Round one, leg two. Joining me tonight is Donal, Hanks, and Niall Newberry. Lads, how are we?
How you doing, lads? What's the crack?
All good, all good. Donal, I'll come to you first. 1-0 industrious victory.
Got the job done. I think is that what we can. But we'll
park that off.
Yeah, like job done. On to the next one. It was always going to be a strange game to be psychologically to get into. When they had been so dominant in the first leg, and I think picking the strongest 11 again tonight. It just had the feel like we're just going to make sure that this job is done. And the performance kind of backed that up the first half. I thought it's going to be difficult to really run through what happened in the game because there wasn't really very much. They eventually just resorted to shooting from the halfway line in the second half just to give us something to talk about. But they got the job done. There was, I guess, good performances again. Same players who are good performances from last week. So pretty positive, under the circumstances.
Niall, it's not too often we get to talk about back-to-back clean sheets, never mind a record aggregate win. I think I seen something from James Rogers there. Would it have been the Riga match? I think it was the last time of 0-0 draws. Would that have been right?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is, Chris. And like you say, like it's not a common thing for any League of Ireland club or Dundalk to keep 2 clean sheets and get 2 wins in a 2-legged match. And, obviously the opposition, were reasonably poor in this first qualifying round. But that's not to take anything away from what Dundalk did. It was, I don't really like cliches, but you can only play what's put in front of you. And, to me, it was job done. It was mission accomplished. All the work was done, as opposed to hard work was done on Thursday night at Oriel. And slightly surprised maybe that he went with the same starting 11 today. But they got the win, 1-0. I wouldn't want to be using Newtown as a barometer for anything. I think Levadia or St. Joseph's, who are not ruling out just yet in the next round, probably provide sterner opposition. Like we played Levadia obviously a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I think, in the Europa League qualifiers. And from looking at, I'm not going to spoof and say I know everything about them, but I think from what I can gather, they're probably stronger than what they were in 2018, and we've probably
seems that way, yeah,
and we've probably regressed since that time as well. So it will probably represent a much tougher task for Dundalk in the second qualifying round, and it's a quick turnover as well. I think it's Thursday week that the first leg scheduled for, and we're not going to know until Thursday who we're playing. And obviously Vinny's already kind of hinted at the lack of preparation even for the Newtown game was slightly alarming. When Vinny came out and made a comment that he didn't even know the colours of the Newtown shirtlet 3 or 4 days before the match. You probably get away with that, lads, against Newtown, but when you're playing Levadia, Tallinn or St. Joseph's or teams down the line, we're going to get pasted if we're coming in with that kind of preparation. So that's just going back to the whole situation at the club at the moment and how it's kind of been run, and the lack of preparation is astounding at times, really, for this game. Even though Newtown were an exceptionally poor side, probably the worst team we've played in European football. I think even Inter Escaldes, the Enduran side we played last year, would probably flitter these boys. Do you know what I mean tonight? So, and they were bad, and Inter were a bad side. They were an awful team to watch. That was a horrible game in Andorra. But
for us then to put a record aggregate win, then that's not easy to do when you're facing poor talent like that. Because sometimes you can seep down to that level. You just grind out the victory. You go through the motions. It ends up being maybe a 3-0 aggregate win, and you go that happened. But 2 clean sheets, that's going to help a BB. A lot of new debuts in European competition for Dundalk as well. To be fair to Vinny, he's ticking a lot of boxes in the right direction all of a sudden. Like we were pasting records at the start of this year for worst start, worst this, worst everything. You know, that seems to have flipped around now. You know, now we've clean sheets. Now we've a record aggregate win. Numerous players scoring their first goal in European competitions, playing their first game in European competition. Like this is, you know, if you could get in the fragile state that this team is in, it's the ideal draw though, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And I think, like, just going back to what you said there, Chris, like, you know, I think Vinny, you know, has made a difference since he's come in. There's no question about that. I'm not saying it's sustainable, but, you know, I did say all along that, like, and I did put it to Jim Magilton, you know, days before Vinny actually got the job, that, you know, maybe the reason for Dundalk's dysfunction on the pitch is probably because, you know, we effectively haven't had a manager. I think I might have said on this podcast as well that we effectively hadn't had a manager all season, because obviously Filippo was in the stand, Shane Keegan at the touchline, Jim Magilton's the sporting director coming in. Like, so even Vinny coming in as that sort of character, just to be the manager for now, even, and be a head coach, probably just adds a bit more stability to the playing staff. And I suppose even like Abibi, the goalkeeper, we referenced clean sheets there, like, you know, Alessio Abibi, you know, who was, you know, was sort of a walking joke there for a while at the start of the year. He's sort of showing glimpses now of, you know, I'm still not going to say I'm convinced by him, but like in the last 4 or 5 games, you know, he's looked a lot more assured. And I think credit where it's due. Like, you know, he's, and I know, like, I actually watched the game back on the Watch or the LOI TV the other night, and, you know, I think Adrian Taff was, like, you know, praising him for, you know, catching across, and we're kind of asking the question, like, should we really be praising the goalkeeper for catching across? Like, but when you factor in what Habibi was doing maybe in the first quarter of the season, like, you know what I mean, like, that actually is a big deal, because his confidence was so low, his confidence was on the ground, and he was obviously dropped for a few games. Peter Cherry came in, and then he was put back in, and he was still making mistakes, and then Cherry made a couple of mistakes in the Longford match. And I just think, I do agree that, like, there has been a bit of stability, and there's been a bit of there has been maybe slight improvements in certain players and whatnot, but I whether it's sustainable remains to be seen. Like, obviously Vinny tasted his first defeat in the league there against Shamrock Rovers, but he came back with a comprehensive 4-0 win in Europe and 1-0 again today. And there does seem to be at least some sort of positive trajectory in terms of results, which we just hadn't got, you know, because with Shane Keegan at the start of the year and with Jim Magilton obviously came in, it just wasn't working for whatever reason. But now we're starting to see a bit more. Like, today was just, I suppose, getting in there and doing a job. It was never going to be a spectacular match, and it wasn't. It wasn't a game that's going to live long in the memory by any stretch of the imagination. But that's only because they had got the 4 goals on Thursday night, which is not even against, you know, below par opposition, which Newtown were, is not always a given for a League of Ireland team. You know, we've got an awful record of just struggling over these kind of matches. You know, even last year, Inter Escaldes 1-0. We've seen teams like Genesesh come here. You know, we weren't really, you know, setting the world alight. Greven match or going back even further. So it's not always a given that you're going to win these games comfortably or comprehensively. And they've done that this time. And, you know, 4-0 on Thursday was equaled our biggest ever European win, and 5-0 is our biggest ever aggregate win, albeit against probably a team that, you know, Treaty United would beat. But still, you know, it's still
now for a cup tie.
But that's what I'm saying, we drew them in the cup. But, you know, but still, it's a European match at the same time, and you can only play what's put in front of you. And the lads did that today, and, you know, they're going home to Ireland with a 5-0 aggregate win. But we can't get away from the fact that the next game, whoever that's against, assuming it's going to be Levadia Tallinn, we're going to have the preparation for a start is going to have to be a lot better, because we're not going to get away with some of that stuff against, say, a Levadia Tallinn, or even in the third round if we play a better side than that.
Donal, like, you know, Niall just referenced there with a similar team that we had for Thursday. It seems to be this chop and changing that we had earlier in the season. Vinny's completely thrown that out now. He's definitely got his preferred starting 11, and even his preferred substitutes. We're starting to see something there for it as well. The goal itself, there was slight shades of a FAI Cup final pass in from Kelly, this time out to Duffy instead of McMillan as it was in the cup final with it. But that classic break we seem to have really nailed that as a club, though, haven't we?
Yeah, that's we'd like if that was like a staple goal that we could score from now on, because it also means that you're more than likely defending a lead and get to break off towards the end and nick another one. But just on the team selection, the same as Niall, I was a little bit surprised that there wasn't changes made. Now we're talking not to dwell on the BB, but just as a footnote, I guess, that the back four hasn't changed, and. You hear the stories of like when, say, David James was at Liverpool and David De Gea at Man United, and goalkeepers that were going through a tough time with certain things, that once the communication between the back four and the goalkeeper was improved, once it got better, once the defenders knew, right, he's not coming for this, or he is coming for this, once they know what's going on, there's obviously going to be some things that a BB will have to improve on by himself, but that's obviously going to make things easier for him if the boys in front of him know what he's going to do and if he knows what they're going to do. So the idea of keeping the team together and keeping mostly the same 11 in is a good thing. I think that I do wonder whether if we hadn't had the 3 COVID cases, whether there would have been more changes. And there felt like a little bit of a flashback to the start of the season towards the end of the game, and we had Han and Mitskogan and Zahibo and Ryan O'Kane. Like, we had all the boys that started the season that just sort of drifted out of the team, and they all drifted back in. So it was a nice little flashback. But I think he does know what his best 11 is. I think he probably will put Hubin back in. He'd be probably his preferred striker.
I think that's okay, though, depending. I think one, if not both, depending on your opposition, there's something to be said for swapping it up. I think depending on if you're up against a big, strong defender who's, not great at turning and there's gaps in behind him, then you play McMillan every day because he'll exploit that space in behind. But if it's going to be a physical game on the floor where someone needs to hold up the ball, I mean, Hubin's a lot better than McMillan at that. So I think I have no problem with him chopping and changing depending on the opposition on that myself.
And that goes down to like the preparation. And I was saying, like, if he looks at Talon or St. Joseph's, depending on who it is, and thinks we need, like, this is going to be a fight, then Hubin goes in. And if there's going to be more space and more technical, maybe it's McMillan that goes in. But I think that he does seem to have a good grasp of what team he wants to pick. And I think then obviously injuries or whatever might come in, but you could pretty much guarantee 7 of the 11 pretty much every game now with him, which we weren't able to do beforehand.
Yeah. Not that we're obsessed with them or anything, lads, but it is half time in Tallaght Stadium. It's 1-0 Shamrock Rovers, so Graham Burke penalty. He has that kind of on a knife edge of a tie. Niall, 2 things I suppose that I picked up on the game there tonight. First and foremost, Will Patching's role, delete out Shields, place in Patching, is that seemed to be exactly the role played tonight?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Because Will Patching, obviously, he's not the same kind of player as Chris Shields. He's a completely different midfield player. He's more of a playmaker. But in fairness to Will Patching, and I'll have to put my own hands up. I wrote him off last year. I thought Will Patching was absolutely, dreadful when he was here last season. The club couldn't give him away. He wasn't named, and he wasn't named in the European squad when Filippo Giovagnoli came in. He was told to go back off to England, look for a club.
That's right.
So we effectively couldn't give him away.
He came with a good pedigree when he first came, though.
He did.
It was highly thought of in the UK.
Yeah, he came through the Manchester City Academy, and you don't do that unless you've got something about you. And I know we see that with a lot of players coming back over to the League of Ireland, where they've had sort of played at those big academies, but don't really cut the mustard in the League of Ireland. But he has come back, and his resurgence has been quite impressive. He goes off to Derry, he comes back here to train to start the season. The club just want shot of him, so they loan him off to Derry, throw him up there. He's there 6 months, absolutely rips it up at the Brandywell. We're suddenly wanting to bring him back, and he's come straight into the team. I thought he was good against Rovers in the league match in the first half. I think the whole team sort of petered out in the second.
Yeah.
Newtown, obviously, the first leg, he scores an absolute worldie and plays well. Today, he comes in, does the same job. Doesn't need to do as much because the game is painstakingly easy today. Do you know what I mean? But it's interesting. Like I don't know how it's going to work going forward. He seemed on Thursday to have Stanton playing behind a midfield four at one point. So we had Patching McElhenney in sort of like a pivot. He sort of had Duffy, Kelly out in the wing, and Stanton almost like behind them. And that seemed to work well against Newtown. Like it seemed to work well in that game. And obviously he had McMillan up top. I'm not sure how that's going to work. Like it's not really a formation it's kind of the same formation we've played, but it's not, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they're not like players. Yeah,
and Stanton's kind of been on, and Stanton's been very impressive. I think he's done really well in the last few weeks. He's one of the very few players who you could probably turn around and say has probably earned it. Like if we were in a position where we were offering, new contracts, he's probably one of the few.
In an alternative universe, I get you.
In an alternate universe, in an alternate multiverse, Chris, where we were offering players' contracts.
We were doing good things as a club, and we were secure in the future. Yeah, I'm with you. It sounds nice, utopia sort of a place.
It's a lovely idea. It's a lovely idea. But if we were doing that, you would think Stanton would be one of the players you're looking at saying, I'd like to keep him next year because he's done quite well. Jarkovska's probably likewise. Some of the others I wouldn't be too sure about. I think, in fairness to Han, Han came on against Newtown in the first leg there. I think Han, in fairness to him, whenever he's come on, he's thrown himself about. He's shown lots of determination. But we're not going to mention some of the other players. Maybe some of the others haven't, covered themselves in glory. Not singling at anybody necessarily, but some of them haven't done enough. Maybe I'm looking at Sahibo, for example, who maybe hasn't done enough. A lot of expectation when he came in, big reputation, and yet he's sitting there on the bench today. And I find that somewhat bizarre that a player that's come in on the money he's on and the reputation he had is coming into a game like this, and even when you would think, like Donald said, even when you would think you would rest a lot of players for this game or change the team a bit, he still sat on the bench and kind of coming on in the second half and not really making much of an impact. So that's obviously a concern. But it goes back to what we said before: when you're signing 13, 14 players, not all of them are going to come in and hit the ground running, and that was always going to be a problem. So you might only get 3 or 4 who will come in who will actually settle quickly. And Stanton's certainly one of them. And Patching, it has been like a new signing. He has been like a new signing since he's come in. Now, hopefully he can keep it up. You start to wonder, what the situation was last year because he didn't look overly great last season. I remember his last game was against Finn Harps and that 0-0 draw. And I for sure thought that was the last we were going to see of him in the Dundalk jersey because, he was that bad, along with a few others. It has to be said. But he's come back and it's a good story for him if he comes back and sort of has a good run in Europe for Dundalk and maybe possibly gets a move back over to the UK. Because there was a situation this time last year where Dundalk literally couldn't give the guy away. So best of luck to him, I suppose.
Donald, I might come to you then on this end, and it's one that Flano's just jumped in before me there and just mentioned the 3 in the middle of the park of Patching, Fats and Stanton. It looked good. We'd seen a couple of little triangles with the 3 of them. They knew their positioning of each other, how to play off each other, who was moving into space and stuff like that. It was nice to see. Clearly, that's something that Vinny's been working on, and you can start to see that coming through.
Yeah, there seems to be a decent understanding between the 3 of them. Again, it's we're just going to have to get used to, obviously, Chris Shields not being in the midfield, but Stanton is playing that role, but doing it kind of differently. And the 2 boys seem to be able, one can sit in next to him and the other floats, and then they can swap that position around where, say, Fats comes and sits and Patching goes out. But I think that when we're talking about the Rovers game and Patching's performance in the Rovers game, that seems like, I would imagine against Talon or whoever we're playing the next game, that it would be, if Sloggett's fit, Sloggett will come in and have the 2 holding midfielders, and one of those 2 will play as a 10, and then Dickie Kelly will drop to the bench. I guess in an ideal world, that would be to keep possession and to try and get hold of possession and not just play counter-attacking football. And they're good enough players on the ball. They should be able to do it. I think it probably took Patching a little bit of time to get used to that position against Rovers, because he'd been so focal to what Derry were doing, and to kind of be like, right, you're part of this system, like you have to do this job now, and we'll get you the ball, but you still have to, like, you're going to have to work with the rest of us. And it'll be interesting to see how that works. There's also, if Fats is still here for the rest of the season. I mean, I think he will be.
If he's going to play like that, we might as well hold on to him till the end of the season, though.
Yeah.
If he's shooting from 35 yards out, I want to keep him.
Yeah, he could have just took the jersey off and walked home after scoring that if it had gone in. But no, it's interesting to do keep him. They have the makings of a good quality midfield there, and I mean, you'll always get this. You get the same game out of Michael Duffy every time, so you know what you're getting from him. And then there's two good forwards up there. It's like they do have the makings of a good squad. It's just I think the problem is probably behind that midfield. But if they can keep Fats and get Patching on a roll, they should have. They should be in good shape for the rest of the season. But who knows? I mean, the things that we thought would happen and the games that we thought they should have won, that they haven't won.
Yeah,
I think that's probably like the best bit about playing a team, say, as poor as Newtown was, that we did beat them, because the lower quality teams in the league, say, this season, we've struggled, like really, really badly struggled against them. So, like we tend to think that the better teams, the lads probably get up for them games more, and it's easier for them to get up for them games. So, like, it's just good. It's good to have gotten over what was potentially an incredible banana skin in that round, and they got through like relatively unscathed, which is, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, I love Sinead just gave her a man of the match and then said she has to go because Love Island's just started. So I think that's where I think Donald's gone too. I think that says a lot about this game, though, as well. It's like, yeah, we won 1-0, great, and on to Love Island. Niall, just on a local note as well, Ryan O'Kane getting on for a bit of international experience there, and Val getting a good portion the second half as well. It's good to see, because when we do think of contracts, we're only looking at those two and Andy Boyle for next year, so we might as well get them experience now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Chris. I think it was one of the highlights maybe of today was seeing the two boys coming on. I think the two lads, Val Adadukin and Ryan O'Kane, anytime I've seen them, really, like, they haven't put many foot wrong anyway. Like, obviously they're two young boys coming from the under-19s, but when they have played, they haven't looked out of place in League of Ireland matches necessarily. And I thought Val, going back to maybe the game in Longford, when he was kind of put in it, he was kind of deployed at full back, left back, and he's probably our best player in that first half, and he's only a kid, really. And it was kind of great seeing those two coming on in what is a European game. I think Vinny got that one right, bringing them on, gives them that bit of experience, that bit of confidence playing games like this. It was a good game to throw them two in off the bench. And like you said as well, we've only got 3 players, as it stands, we've only got 3 players who are signed up for next season, and 2 of those are Adadokin and O'Kane, the other one being Andy Boyle. So, like, we have to look to the future, and obviously we've got Stephen McDonnell, who is, obviously the academy manager now at the club. The under-19s got the first win this weekend, which was good to see, So hopefully there's some more progression on that, and hopefully that will move forward. But I think we do need to see a stronger, academy base. We need to see, obviously, the town, like the Dundalk as a town, has been crying out for a long time. Crying out for more local talent coming through. Haven't really had a local player make a massive impact at the club, and even throughout the glory of Stephen Kenny, 6 or 7 years in charge.
Was probably the last.
Tiernan Mulvena, had a good spell. Mark Griffin had a good spell on the Green Foster at one point. But we haven't seen a Dundalk lad come out and be a star, like a real star in this team. And maybe that was one of the disappointing elements of Stephen Kenny's legacy, is that we never actually had a player in that era who was local, a Tommy McConville or whatever, you know what I mean? And somebody that, generations going down the line can look up and say, oh yeah, or a Barry Keogh, like, you know what I mean? And even going back even well before, like Joey Donnelly, someone like that, like, and that's maybe one of the criticisms of the Stephen Kenny era, was that we never had that. We never really had it. I know Shane Grimes came back to be a squad player, and done quite well when called upon. The two O'Connor boys, were part of the team at one point. But we never really had. We never really had that continuous. We never had that player who was holding the place in the team.
Something to do with the misguidance from the FAI. I mean, they're now talking about, and I feel it's a Brexit thing that's kind of pushed them down this route. They're kind of saying, we need to be building academies. But realistically, let's call a spade here. The FAI just went, hey, if anyone is looking to get into the elite level of football in this country, they'll be snapped up at the age of 15 by an academy in the UK, and that's it taken care of. We don't have to do anything here. They'll go to the select few clubs in this country, and they'll be taken away, and they'll get their football education elsewhere, and we don't have to deal with it. We'll eventually come back and pick them up for the international team, and that's it done. It's only now when they realise, well, actually now under Brexit ruling, they can't go over until they're the age of 19. Now we need to do an academy. Like, imagine we had this, 10, 15 years ago, in particular when and I always said it was a massive opportunity. We were building the YDC at the time. Monaghan had imploded. There was no other club in the Northeast. We should have had every bit of talent in the Northeast in Dundalk Football Club under academy and bringing them all in, and we completely mismanaged. And I think the whole league mismanaged, and was we were too busy bickering about schoolboy football versus league football and who takes control of these kids, and no one thought actually the most important thing is the player development and how that happens. And now we've come to this point. Now it's like, for me, it's like a scramble around. Let's get these leagues. Let's get this all sorted. Let's keep adding in more underage ones, and schoolboy leagues are trying to figure, well, where do we fit in on this football pyramid all of a sudden? When this should have all been married up a long, long time ago and made this work. Like the partnership every Premier Division had to do with some sort of a schoolboy academy. That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, no. And I think it's been something I've said to people in town for a long time. And hopefully now it's going to do something. But it just seems unfortunate that they've hired an academy manager in Stephen McDonnell, and suddenly the club looks like it is going to cut budgets on the back of that. But in relation to what you said there, Chris, I think you only have to look at today. Jimmy Dunn signing for QPR. Signing a 3-year contract with QPR. Played in the Premier League for Burnley, scored on his debut for Burnley, played at Rock Celtic in the Dundalk Schoolboys League, was never at any point on the books of Dundalk FC. To me, that's staggering. And there's other players as well. And there's other players who've I'm not sure if Frank Osadebe was ever on the books of Dundalk FC. He might have been, so I'm open to correction on that.
I'm not too sure. I couldn't tell you.
But he's obviously over in England. He's done quite reasonably well in the Football League in England. But Jimmy Dunn obviously being the best example. It staggers me that in a town that isn't, this isn't London. It's a small pool of players playing in the Dundalk Schoolboys League, and how a player of Jimmy Dunn's caliber could have been at one point playing in the Dundalk Schoolboys League and not have been picked up and said, okay, Dundalk FC is going to sign this player on youth forms or whatever, and if a Burnley wants to come in and sign him, they're going to fork out a 6-figure sum for him. Because let's be honest, that's how the League of Ireland's going now. And I think that's why Dundalk have almost jumped on the bandwagon of nearly what Shamrock Rovers have been doing with like Gavin Bazunu, for example. Because that's where the reality of League of Ireland is you aren't going to get a penny for a player like Darrell Horgan or a player like Richie Towell. No. But you might get a 6-figure sum for a Ryan O'Kane. Do you know what I mean?
With an add-on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly, with an add-on.
And even Bowes are still making money out of Matt Doherty years later.
Exactly, yeah. And I know I'm not trying to bring back the goalkeeper situation again. I don't really want to, but you can't really ignore the fact as well that we had David Odamusu on the books here at Dundalk, the young Drogheda goalkeeper who, and I've seen him a few times, he's absolutely sensational. Yeah. And Watford have been looking at him. He's going to go to England sooner rather than later. He's a real talent. The first time I actually saw him was actually at the Jim Malone Cup match. I think it was a year or two ago. And I remember saying to people, who's that guy there? He's like, I think he was only 16 or 17 at the time. And I goes, who's he? And someone said to me, he was here last year. He was under 19s. And I goes, why didn't we keep him around? And we're sitting here and we're scrambling and we can't get a goalkeeper. And I know Elito's had a mini resurgence of form, but that's still a massive elephant in the room, the goalkeeping situation here. And we got David Odemusu, who was on the books at Dundalk. What's to say David Odemusu won't go? What's to say David Odemusu won't go and, draw the United, we get a six-figure sum of somebody, Watford or some other club, and we'd be sitting there kicking ourselves saying that could have been us. I just think there was massive, huge mismanagement in the youth structures at the club, not through the fault of anybody in particular. I just think, the structure just wasn't in place for people to do the work that was needed to be done. Hopefully, I was very excited with the appointment of Stephen McDonnell at the start of the year. I was very excited about it, but you're wondering, is it going to even mean anything now? Because the way the club's kind of been run at the minute, is even Stephen McDonnell going to be here next year or in 2 years? Do you know what I mean? We don't really know what's going on.
Which is strange, because if we're struggling with a first team, you could always pepper them around with some of our under 19 squad and flesh out your squad that way if you're trying to cut budget. So the last thing we should be doing is considering cuts at our underage level, because that could be the stability of this club come the future. And I think Flano just come in there and just said that he thinks that Jimmy might have gone just before the underage structures came in. But like you say, that only backs your point of a missed opportunity, because the structures weren't in place. So
that's it, and that's kind of that's sort of the point. It's like there wasn't even a structure in place to bring in a player, to see it, to headhunt a player to see a player like Jimmy Dunn playing at Sandy Lane on Blackrock on a Saturday or Sunday morning, under 15, 14 level, and saying, get him up to Oriel Park, sign him on to one of our youth teams, and go from there. It baffles me. And obviously Frank Osadebe is another one. David Odemusu, who we had gone, never signed up, never given any sort of chance to prove himself at first team level. So I just think, I really hope. I think Ryan O'Kane's been a real, and Val Adedokan as well. They've been real, shining lights. They've offered a lot of hope, and it sort of shows maybe there is something in place, because Ryan O'Kane, there's no question, is an exceptional talent.
Absolutely.
Anytime I've seen him play, he's impressed me. Hasn't looked out of place at any stage. Val Adedokan, likewise. I know he's not necessarily a local boy, but he's come from Malahide United. But it's great to see a lad.
It's still the young lads getting a chance. Donal, I might just bring you in on this. And the thing about it is, Donal, we're all talking this now probably as being a massive opportunities for the academy structure. And I've often said that when you see young lads get into teams in English leagues, whether it's a championship up, and you see young lads coming in maybe 17, and the first thing they say is, wow, I was not ready for the physicality of it all. Now, if you think of guys playing in our under 19s at the moment and then get a chance to step in, I mean, they're playing in a league full of men. They could potentially playing up to the age of 19 against men in this league. That should be a massive advantage to us, that instead of playing underage football in academies in the UK, you can now play first team football against, let's face it, seasoned professionals in a lot of cases, very, very experienced players. They're going to learn a lot more surely here doing that than going over to play in an academy game in England. Yeah,
and it benefits everybody, because we get to find out how good the players are. How many stories has there been of lads that have been in academies that played against their own age group and then go off into bigger clubs and just don't make it? We find out so much more about these lads and about how good they are if they were playing proper competitive football, and I think there's things like, even Gary Rogers was saying after he left that we knew that he was retired. We knew what age he was. We knew that a point was going to come fairly soon that he wasn't going to be the goalkeeper anymore.
Yeah,
and it's like a.
With the fact that we kept handing him 1 year contracts over and over again.
It just goes to show you, if there has been planning in these things, everything would be so much easier for us. It seems like it's the simplest thing in the world to be right, well, let's have a goalkeeper ready to go for when Gary Rogers retires, because he's obviously coming close to it. I got distracted there for a second because I think Chris Shields scored a penalty, but it just popped up it was like the Kill Bill sound was going off because he scored. But yeah, outside of like the academy stuff, like even having Stephen McDonnell in, now we're looking at a whole different set of problems. It was like we tried to make an attempt at this, and then the rug's going to be pulled from under us. Yeah, that's good.
That's my concern. Yeah, that's my concern.
Yeah, we
actually have.
Yeah, we tried to do it. We tried to make an attempt at it, and now it's going to be like, well, look, none of that's going to matter now, and we're going to be another good few years before we can get our footing again.
Yeah, like the idea was there, and it was a great idea, and the same as a lot of other things that have happened at the club that have been, as a premise, a great idea, but like Donald said, is it going to be pulled from underneath us now because of the way the club's been run or mismanaged? And are we going to go back to a situation where the next Ryan O'Kane or the next Jimmy Dunn is heading off St. Kevin's boys before he plays for Dundalk? So when you look at Jimmy Dunn's, when people in England talk about Jimmy Dunn, they'll turn around and say, "Oh, well, he came from St. Kevin's boys in Dublin. He didn't come from Dundalk." That's what you're seeing, and like we don't, and like Dundalk's not getting a penny for any of these players anyway. And like the academy is a great idea. Like Rovers have had good success with it. They've had good success with it. They've made a few quid from players who've gone, and Gavin Bazunu being the best example. Manchester City, and he's now an international goalkeeper. Like, but he also got a spell in the first team as well. And yeah, I absolutely share Donald's fear there that like this just feels like it was a great idea on the surface, and it's just going to be pulled from underneath us, and there's no telling where Dundalk SC is going to be in 12 months, 18 months.
Surely have an academy that's run correctly with players that have a lot of potential only puts Dundalk at a better valuation, because you're saying there's a potential players that they could make X amount of money if they continue within the academy structure. So it's important to keep them, blah, blah, blah. These are all factors that we need to make sure we're holding in place, and the Peak Six are leveraging to sell on, surely. That seems like an obvious statement, no?
Yeah, it would be. Like,
wait, I said Peak Six and obvious in the same sentence. How did I do that?
Yeah, Peak Six, it doesn't really, and that's just another thing. Like, it's just, the logic of Peak Six is sort of, it's mind bending really at times. Like, you know what I mean? It just doesn't, nothing seems to make any sense. And I'm not even sure they would realize that this would add value. And even in today's context of European football, like the fact that we have a 10.5 coefficient, so a prospective buyer for the club for a start wouldn't have to come in and buy a club and start from scratch. Dundalk are already ready-made. They don't have to go through all that grueling process of building the coefficient and becoming a seeded club in European competitions. Dundalk's already there, so it should be a very attractive prospect for any buyer. But you just don't really know what's going on in the background, or what Peak Six or who they're talking to, or who they're negotiating with. You don't even know. There could be negotiations going on tonight, and we wouldn't know who they're talking to. The Venkies could buy the club for all we know. Do you know what I mean? And that wouldn't even surprise me at this point. Do you know what I mean? Because there's nothing, guys, in the last 18 months has made any sense to them. And even Vinnie Perth, who obviously I've got respect for, but the way it's gone full circle from less than 12 months ago to Vinnie Perth being in the job again as a short-term head coach, it's baffling like how it's worked. It's just it's baffling, and it's not a criticism of Vinnie Perth necessarily. It's more a criticism of how the club's been run. And I was sat there a few weeks ago after Vinnie Perth's first game, and back at the club interviewing him with the rest of the media. And I'm just in disbelief, really. I'm just thinking, how has it got to here? Have I been frozen for 12 months and all this was just a bad dream? And Vinnie Perth is still in charge, and we're still winning leagues, and we're still doing this, that, and the other thing. Well, it's not. We've had 4 managers in that interview. We've had 4 managers, I suppose. Yeah, we've had Filippo. We've had Vinnie himself, obviously, twice now. Jim Magilton and Shane Keegan, you could count as well in that.
Yeah.
That's all in less than 12 months. And I was actually talking to the Newtown manager, Chris Usla, before the first leg. And I asked him what his opinion on that was, and he's obviously said like he didn't,
He's there for what, 7 years or something? Am I right?
He's there since so he came there the same year that we appointed Stephen Kenny in 2013.
Wow!
And like they're an amateur, they're effectively a semi-professional slash amateur club, and yet they can have that sort of stability. And even when things don't go well one year, they can still stick with it and have the success that they've had for a small club to be in Europe today is a big deal. Like,
is that part of the football culture though within UK, that football is an industry and even small amateur part-time clubs like this can find a way of keeping somebody like that in. I mean, we're constantly firefighting at this level for professional football level. It seems like that's the big part. Like in the UK, like you hear from a lot of players, they would say, I could come back to Ireland, get a 1-year contract on, if I was lucky, I could get $1,000 a week. I could stay second or third tier, possibly get like $2,000 a week, and I could bounce around different contracts with different clubs for X amount of seasons out of it. You could potentially jump around maybe 6-7 seasons on that sort of money, because there's that football industry over there. We don't have it as an industry here.
It's a key word, and I think even Vinny Part referenced that, even for coaches, there is no industry here, and it just comes from a lack of pure negligence, I suppose, of the game in Ireland, which is undeniable negligence of the game.
Well, it's just another level. We just talked about academies, and now we're talking at professional levels where there's also neglect. So there you go.
Yeah, but it's top to bottom, and not only not at Dundalk necessarily, but in the country and the league as a whole. And that's why, obviously, I watched the European Championships, and I enjoyed watching it, and I enjoyed the matches, and I enjoyed the final. I was impartial to the final personally. I didn't mind if Italy won or England won, but there was a lot of Irish Twitter, for example, was mental on Sunday night. Effectively laughing at England for and I'm not.
Are these not some of the layers though who pack out the Aviva every week, yet wouldn't go around the corner to their local football club?
This is my point. And we're effectively laughing at, as a collective, we're laughing at England for losing a European Championships final. England have probably punched above their weight in that tournament, and yet our last competitive game we lost, 1-0 at home to Luxembourg in a World Cup qualifier, while football in this country just remains in the gutter, and somehow Sunday was a victory for people, for the football community. And I'm like, we need to get our house in order. We need to. It's easier said than done. It's not going to take one person to sit there and do it. It's going to take years and years and years to do it, but it can be done. You look at the Belgium. The Belgian national team was in bits at one stage. They're now one of the superpowers in European football. It can be done. Even looking at leagues across Europe, it can be done, but it needs the right people behind it. And Dundalk had done so many things right off the pitch for a long time, and I just feel like a lot of the good work has been undone, and it's almost tragic looking at it before my very eyes. Almost it's been evaporated. Good work that was done by people at the club to build Dundalk into a club that actually has a 10.5 coefficient in European football, and can get through a few rounds and get to a couple of group stages, and play against teams like Arsenal and Zenit St. Petersburg and not look out of place necessarily. That was all done without Peak Sixes coming in. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. That was all done before they came in. So I just feel like I was actually talking to somebody.
Have we stagnated then?
Well, you can say we stagnated, but I think it's worse than that. I think it's disintegrating, is what it is. And I was actually talking. I was talking to another guy after one of the matches there, another reporter, and what he said was, and it was a good point, and I was inclined to agree. If a Shamrock Rovers fan bought the club and deliberately tried to run it into the ground, they probably couldn't have done it as quickly as Peak Six have in since 2018, since they've come in. And I thought it was. I've been up there for a while now, and it was actually the truest comment I've heard in a long, long time, and it just made a lot of sense, because you couldn't it's almost it's almost difficult to do that, because Dundalk for a long time were almost an autopilot in the League of Ireland. It was like a Celtic scenario early in Scotland, just winning games, brushing teams aside, winning leagues, winning cups, playing in Europe and doing their bit. And it just seems almost overnight these guys have come in, and it was all peaches and cream when Stephen Kenny was still there, because the club was still an autopilot. But once Stephen Kenny went off to the FEI and the Republic of Ireland, suddenly Peak Six started making decisions. And that's when we started to see the whole thing come to where it is, and it's deeply worrying. I do think there could be a silver line. If somebody comes in good and buys it, somebody decent comes in and buys the club, it could be salvaged. But now, because we still have a very healthy coefficient and all that kind of stuff, but it's a very sort of worrying time, and it's very unstable and unnerving time for a lot of Dundalk fans because we don't really know what's around the corner. And
I take it that comment is right. Then there's a second goal from Shamrock Rovers. Am I right?
Yeah, Maiden Chelsea scored as well.
No. Richie Towe.
Dick Towe.
I say nothing about that.
Yeah. Look, I think we kind of went off on one, but it's an important conversation to have about football in Ireland in different levels. So, I think these sort of platforms are always good for a good debate and a good chat about it. And, you can tell by some of the comments that was coming in, a lot of people are in agreement with us on some of the points. On to Saturday's game, home to Finn Harps at 4 p.m. on a Saturday kickoff. This is outrageous, lads. What's going on? I don't know about playing at this time. What do you think? I think we could nearly have a good shot at what the starting lineup's going to be, right?
Yeah. I don't know when the boys are supposed to be back. The COVID lads, whether they're going to be in contention or not. I know the European travel
another PCR test anyway.
Yeah, but yeah, you can pretty much if there was no injuries or anything today, you'd be like, that's just going to be the same 11 again. I think this is the kind of game that has tripped us up so far this season. The game where you're thinking, surely they're going to win, surely they're going to put a performance in.
The Longford game was kind of like that with Vinny's first one, but in hindsight, that draw got us on this run. I'll stand corrected on this. Were we 6 games under Vinny, including the cup ones, the European Cups, and that 4 victories, 1 draw, one defeat. So you'll think where that draw came to have 4 victories. I know it's only whatever, 2 in the league and 2 in European Cup under, like we just mentioned it there, and poor opposition. But lads, 4 wins, 1 draw, and a defeat. I would have been calling out for this earlier in the season. So are we approaching this maybe in a different mentality than we did that Longford match?
I still think there's a bit more groundwork to be done before we could be confident of going into pretty much any game. I think there's still scarring from the start of the season. There's still can you trust this team to turn up? Can you trust certain players not to make mistakes? Can you trust certain players to come up with the goods going forward? It's just hard to. There is a consistency in those results, but that's only 5 results or 6 results. You're looking over the 18 games or whatever it is that we've had, and you're there's been some incredibly different performances. Even some of the games that they've won that they've been really poor in. So I think they're still so unpredictable in terms of performance levels. But you'd still think they have to have enough to win. And what's going to happen is if these games slip away from us, we're going to end up in that situation that we talked about for the last couple of weeks about just drifting in the middle of the table. And trying to get people motivated when there's nothing to play for in the league is going to be really, really, really difficult. So they have to win games like this to get out of 3rd last or 4th last or whatever. They have to win these games now.
Niall, and on that point, but we've seen a difference in performance from some of the big players, and I'm talking about Andy Boyle really stepping up of late. He's putting some really good performances. Now we've got Michael Duffy possibly back on some sort of scoring trail. We've got a revived player in Will Patching all of a sudden. I mean, we are talking a different morale level for a lot of these players. They're not quite in the gutter as we had them 6 games ago. So could that be a difference going into this one? And you look at the form then, I suppose, of Harps at the same time. See, we kind of flip-flopped here slightly.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Last time we played Harps, they were on a bit of a high. It was early in the season, and I think they might have been even top of the league at that stage. At one stage, you know what I mean? They were flying, and it seems like they've gone the other way. Yeah, that's right. But then I think they've sort of gone the other way. They're now looking over their shoulders in terms of, could one of the bottom 2 catch them? Could Waterford catch them? Who've got a couple of wins recently. Do you know what I mean? One of them was against us. So, they'll be worried. But they need points. And Dundalk, we're talking about, can we change the team around? We probably can't, because we haven't got a lot of bodies. Like as I was saying to Donald before we started, like we've let 3 or 4 players go, and we haven't brought one in.
Who were all starters, really.
Yeah, and we obviously had a minor COVID outbreak at the club during last week, where 3 players are. I'm not sure if they're going to be available for Saturday. I'm probably guessing they probably won't be.
Probably not.
So you can't make too many changes in that sense. And the players have only come back from a 2-legged European game. It's going to be a tough match. Now, we should be winning the game. Like you've seen players, and you're right. Like Andy Boyle, for example. Like Andy Boyle, it wasn't that long ago. Andy Boyle was the best defender in the country. And for whatever reason, his form had dipped under. But again, that only comes with the instability of nearly having a new manager every week in the dugout, which was never going to suit any player, especially a professional player like Andy Boyle, who's part of that Stephen Kenny success story.
Yeah.
So you have seen a re-emergence. Michael Duffy starting to look more like himself. I know it's painful because McElhenney is leaving, but even McElhenney today was outstanding. I thought he was really, really good. Showed lots of confidence. Probably something we didn't see enough of McElhenney in that zone in a second spell. I go back to McElhenney in 2017, and he was doing that kind of stuff every week.
Yeah.
Since he came back from Oldham, it's sort of been fleeting performances like that. Today was one of them, but he was very good.
Cup final one would be another.
Cup final, in 18. Yeah. But he's a top player, and he's a big loss, as is Chris Shields. I don't know, like there doesn't seem to be any movement in terms of players coming in, and that's obviously a concern because with all the games coming, obviously the FAI Cup draw was made today, Treaty United and that as well. Europe, we're still in Europe. There's going to be a lot of games coming thick and fast now, and I'm not sure we've got the squad depth. Like something Vinny did do very well in his first spell, I thought anyway, was he managed the squad quite well, especially in 2019. I thought he managed the squad really, really well. 2020, it changed for whatever reason. I don't know what happened, but.
Would we be looking at a week in July where we'd have a home European tie on the 22nd? Oh no, Donald.
Then no.
I got worried when you were. I was like, don't say there's another one from Rovers.
No. I won't be.
We could have game say in Tala against Tallinn, possibly say the 22nd, and then on this Sunday the 25th, we could have our FAI Cup draw. Wow.
Yeah, I think that's what it's supposed to be.
It's a fair bit to be packing in. And like you say, of a team where maybe Vinny trusts his starting 11, and outside of that, like we talked about fringe players and whether they're coming in, technically you need 4 of them to be able to come in to replace, to keep the same levels on it. And the way Treaty are picking up points, that's an outstanding job done with that club when you think how late players were signed in and everything at the club, and to be, getting a draw. I know it was nearly last kick of the ball against Shells last week, but it just shows that they're taking on the likes of Shells in that division at the moment. They're really going for it. That's not going to be an easy one. And away there as well, there will be fans in attendance. That could be an increased attendance on that one. That could be. You're probably talking a couple of hundred in at that one too. It's going to be a bit of a partisan atmosphere in that one. So there's a fair bit stacked now, isn't there?
Yeah, I'd be worried about that, to be honest with you, because Treaty, I know I kind of joked, earlier on, but Treaty probably would be a step above Newtown even, you know what I mean? In fairness, if we're being honest, Newtown sort of reminded me of Dundalk when they went into Europe in 2002, on the back of getting relegated. It was a sort of they were there, but they were just happy to be there and got tanked. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So but yeah, I think that's not the best draw. I think something happened.
Scared me, don't know.
There's been another goal in Tala. We have to go to Chris Kamara, who scored.
Final score on us here.
Slovan scored. So it's 2-1.
Oh, Vice.
Vladimir Vice.
Apologies for interrupting you.
No, it's okay. I have no problem being interrupted when Rovers have conceded a goal in a game like that. But I can say that here. But I think
this conversation, lads, was about 5 minutes tonight on Dundalk. The rest has been on academy football, FAI mismanagement, and Shamrock Rovers from the rematch.
But anyway, I think So I just think What was I saying there again? I can't even remember what I was saying. Oh, I was talking about
Is that your voice?
No, it was before that.
No, sorry. With
Treaty,
the
wasn't
core
it?
11, the Vinny will
Yeah.
back, and who he can bring in off the bench, and we're potentially going to have to use them. And that treaty, I was paying attention. I'm so
Yeah,
proud.
Treaty. That was what it was. Treaty. Yeah, Treaty's going to be a tough game, and like and like I said, they're flying in the first division. They're flying in the first division, and and like you said, Chris, and you're absolutely right. Vinny, I do get the impression that Vinny trusts certain players, he doesn't trust others. Some players have been moved on. Obviously we've seen Junior go to Derry, Jesus Perez has moved back to America. Players that weren't really playing in the squad anyway, and players you'd probably question why were signed in the first place.
Yeah.
Especially Perez. The Perez one baffles me to this day. Like, it just didn't seem it didn't make any sense bringing him in.
It's a bit like a Tanner Duggan signing, though, wasn't it? It's like where it is.
Yeah,
where is he?
it just doesn't.
All of it.
Yeah, and you wonder. Like, I think Perez played 10 minutes of one game or something. Like, and we never saw him again. I'm thinking, like, what was the point? Junior came in, didn't really work out for him. Had a decent reputation coming in, but in the squad now, there's still players who are kind of in that sort of grey area, and you wonder, does Vinny trust half the players he has? And I do get the impression the ones he's picking are the ones he trusts. Sounds kind of obvious, but what happens if we get 1 or 2 injuries now in the next few weeks with the schedule that's coming up? Like, this is the busy time of the year now, and we haven't really got the squad, we haven't really got the bodies to manage that.
I'm just thinking, when you hark back to Stephen Kenny's time and that, and he always looked to get a bit of extra experience in at this time. He's always said with Europe coming, we got the Alan Keane in before, and that it's like that's the sort of player that we need to bring in at this time. And instead, we're kind of gone the opposite. We've dropped down the numbers a touch. And
I know there's even talk that McElhenney could be going in the summer, which would be madness. Like, because to me, like, considering like today's game, well, obviously we went through it. That's worth in excess of €300,000 to Dundalk FC. To then let McElhenney go off on it for a nominal, let's be honest, what is a nominal fee from Derry City? Would make absolutely, exactly. So it would make zero sense. You'd be better off just keeping McElhenney until the end of the season and letting him go on a free then, in the hope that he could help you towards getting through a couple more rounds in Europe. Now, that all sounds very commonsensical, but we're not dealing with a commonsensical situation here in terms of the ownership. And that's what worries me. Is it going to be just McElhenney going? I'm hearing rumours of other players who could be going. These are all things that obviously concern me, and I'm thinking, like, but what's more concerning is there doesn't seem to be any movement in terms of players coming in, and that's something that surprises me. I thought
even retention.
Even retaining players, Chris. So, like, at the end of the day, there is that argument as well. Who can you bring in of any considerable value that's going to come to a club? Like, let's be honest, we are, like, even though we're in Europe, we've been a basket case this season. Who's going to come in as a foreign player, even on a 6-month deal, and play for this team for 6 months in the hope that something works out and they get him moved somewhere else? You've probably got a very small pool of players. You've probably got a very small pool of players, and you probably, I know we joked about it before we came on, you're probably bringing in some of the players of the caliber that we might have brought in under the Sean Connery era. Do you know what I mean? Like, in terms of, these crazy journeyman characters who come in and just, I suppose you could probably argue we've already got half of them. Some of them to club, like, you know what I mean? When you think about it. So, like, it hasn't
Mad
really,
Mickey comes down from the north again, lads. I'm done.
Oh, Jesus, yeah. I think I'll say nothing about that, guys, to be honest.
Yeah. Right, look, we'll just do a prediction, I think, for Saturday's game, and we leave it at that, because we just kind of wanted to just touch on the result tonight, and I actually think we just brought up some really good topics though as well. Donald, I'll come to yourself first. For Finn Harps at home, what are we thinking?
I'll take a 2-1 win. I think it is going to be a tough game, and I think they might find it a bit of a shock going from the 2 games against Newtown to go and play Finn Harps, because I think the level might rocket up in the first 5 minutes. So, like, they're like, oh, this is a proper match we're in now. So I'll take a 2-1 win.
No.
Yeah, I think Dundalk will win the game on Saturday. I'm going to go with a 2-0 win. I think we will keep a clean sheet. I think Alessio Abibi is going to rid the demons.
You're your favourite player, not?
Yeah, maybe he is. I better not tell Johnny Malone that, but yeah. But
in Abibi we trust. There's a new mug coming here, lads.
That's replacing no fats, no party. But I didn't say that, by the way. But I think he will keep a clean sheet. He might rid the demons of the last time we played Harps at Oriel when he made that horrific mistake to allow them the goal. So I think Dundalk will win the game. I think we have shown a bit more stability since Vinny's come back, and I think we will get another 3 points on Saturday. But it's the game on Thursday. I'll be looking at the Levadia Tallinn. Not ruling out St. Joseph's, but what looks like it's going to be Levadia Tallinn, maybe in Tala on Thursday. So we'll see how that goes as well. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes, and it'll be interesting, very, very interesting to see what team Vinny goes with on Saturday. Because I get the impression, guys, and I know I'm repeating myself, but I get the impression that he probably couldn't make changes if he wanted to at this point.
Yeah.
But 2-0 Dundalk.
Yeah, look, I'm with you on this one now. I think we can get another clean sheet as well, but I'm just going to scrape it with a 1-0. We'll get something in the first half, and we're just going to lose our fingernails in the second half, hoping that we'll hang on. Gents, I want to thank you for jumping on tonight. We'll be back probably with a stronger lineup on Saturday. We'll have the other lads back in. Niall, thank you so much for jumping at late notice tonight as well.
Yeah, no problem at all, guys.
I want that noted as well. As always. Straight in off the bench. We have a stronger bench than some people have. Thanks so much, lads. Thanks everybody for tuning in, for the comments in tonight. And Donald, I'll let you end tonight because you're clearly watching the Rovers match and not this.
I'm gonna go with hopefully for the rest of the season we can say no fats, no party.